Welcome to HempLogic Radio, where we attempt to sift facts from opinions in this upside-down world of industrial hemp.
Hey, it's Corey with HempLogic. HempLogic Radio seems my executive better half and co-host to the show. I think I actually pulled a typical husband thing and forgot to tell her that we were on the radio this morning. So I have no co-host. In typical live radio fashion, I'm by myself. I'm supposed to be on the show with Michele Thorne from Food Lane. We were supposed to be doing a dual podcast this morning, and I think something happened in her world, and so I'm out here by myself. And this time I have a little bit to talk about. So, and this is also an open mic episode. So I posted this on LinkedIn. If you'd like to call in and get on the radio and talk 5 minutes about whatever you want to talk about, you can do that too. So until Michele calls in, I'll just kind of go flow with the here. So what we were going to talk about this morning was the collapsing food chain. And actually what that means to you. And this has been a hot topic for the last almost 2 weeks. But, we had a guest, Shay Myers from Ohio Produce, and he dumped 1 million pounds of onions, and it caused quite a stir. New York Times flew out to interview him, and Michele actually interviewed him. I think her episode comes and drops tomorrow. So speaking of Michele, I think she's on here. Let me see if I can get her on with me. Michele.
Good morning.
So I don't know if you heard, talking a little bit about about our topic today, and talking about your podcast dropping tomorrow, right?
Yeah, Friday. Tomorrow's Friday, right?
Tomorrow, I think it is. Tomorrow is Friday.
Tomorrow's Friday. Yeah, with Shay Myers.
Yes, Shay Myers. He's a really neat guy. He's, I interviewed him. He was the first-year hemp farmer last year, and just pretty much like everybody else, kind of lost his ass. And we were talking about all the pitfalls of being a new hemp farmer and whatnot. And then he goes and rolls right into this. And it's, oh man, the farm is fairly large, I think. And he makes some really good videos.
I think so too. I mean, he's been very active, very visible the last several weeks. Obviously, I love what they're doing up there. I mean, they're unlike a lot of, from what I see anyway, and I could be wrong, maybe I just don't know enough farmers, but he's really integrated, which I think is part of what helps to cushion him against some things like this, possibly. I didn't get a chance to him that, but, he posted something today.
Yeah, I talked to him earlier in the week. Was it early? So we're Thursday. I think it was either Saturday or Sunday I spoke to him. And, he dumped that video, went total viral on LinkedIn. I haven't looked at it lately, but the last time I looked at it, it was over 60,000 views. And, wow. Of course, all the comments and I think you and I've spoken about this, is there's just no way he can take that. I think it was 17 truckloads of onions that he dumped in a ditch. Yep. And the food banks and everything, you should take it to a food bank. Are you going to take a whole truckload of onions that he's actually donating his time, money, equipment? Are you going to take on a whole semi-load of onions? It just doesn't work. And that's part of, the food chain. I've been talking about it, and I'm not an expert. I just happen to know what this looks like from a farming standpoint. And there's going to be a lot of problems in the near future.
Yeah, absolutely. Economically, ecologically, I think it's going to be tough for people, emotionally and psychologically. At some point, food is really important to all of us. We require it,
Yeah, it's unfortunate. You got to stop what you're doing and eat every once in a while.
Yeah.
But the food chain is broken, and people are not seeing it, and I think they can't see it because they don't understand it.
Right.
I've gotten in arguments on LinkedIn with some people that are, they're more, it's save the world, save the planet, cows are bad, we need to stop subsidizing big ag. Well, guys, big ag feeds the world. And if that source of food goes away, it's going to be, millions and millions of people could die of starvation if this collapses completely. And it's a serious problem. That might be a little bit exaggerated, but if the milk supply, the dairy farmers, if they have to go, if this continues on, they're going to have to sell some of their cows. I don't.
Yeah, it's really interesting because when you look at the circle called the food supply chain, it starts with the farmer, right? It starts with the good that's being produced or grown or raised. And then it goes to a processor, and then it goes to packaging, and then it goes to a distributor, and then it goes to the retail level, then it comes to the consumer, and then it goes into a waste stream, and then that's back to the farmer. So it's this loop that we're in, and we could surmise that at every point along that chain, every link in that chain has some dysfunction, and we're seeing it. It's being exposed right now because of what's happening as a result of the coronavirus. I read something yesterday that was talking about how we're about to see shortages of meat because the Smithfield Farms plants in the Midwest have to shut down because some of their employees have been tested positive for coronavirus. And so they're predicting now, on top of all of the milk that's being dumped and the eggs being crushed and the onions that are spoiling in the field and everything else, the squash, the tomatoes, we're about to see meat shortages along with all the other shortages that we're seeing at the retail level, like flour and yeast and things like that, which is, super concerning. It's just really concerning. And, I think we talked about it a little bit yesterday in our conversation about these impacts. What happens next when there's no food in the grocery store and there's no food coming from the distributor and there's no food coming from the farmers?
Yeah, it's the simple. I've seen it time and time again. People will chime in and they'll say, "Well, why don't you just go direct to the consumer?"
There's a cost involved with that.
17 semis that were supposed to go to the packing plant didn't make it to the packing plant. There's not a direct consumer that can take on 17 truckloads, and it's there's a lot of different things that are happening, but and
there's a cost that goes with that, right? There's a cost that the farmer would incur trying to get the produce from one place to another, and it's more expensive to truck it somewhere or several places to make deliveries because you've got the cost of staff, you've got the cost of fuel, you've got the cost of the truck and the people who are getting it from one place to another, and that burden would fall on the farmer to do that. And at least that's my understanding.
These big farmers are not Amazon. They're not
right.
set up to do direct. It's not set up like that. And I think, well, what about big ag? What about big ag? Well, the big ag, it's these large, I'm just using Shays just because it's so, I happen to know that I know him, spoken to him about the situation, so I'm using him as a perfect example. But there's These farmers are all over the United States, Florida, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona. They're all going through this. Farmers are tilling under lettuce. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to. There's not someone will ask, well, is there anything we can do? No, except turn the economy back on because it's so big.
Well,
the scale is so
Shay,
large.
When I interviewed Shay this week, I asked him that same question. I said, well, what can we do? What can we do, right? We know what is happening, but what can we do? And his answer to that was very interesting. And he said that, we can begin to ask our retail locations, our grocery store buyers to purchase from U.S. farmers. A lot of consumers don't really understand that where their food comes from, right? So the country of origin, he called it the COOL, these regulations that require producers to put their country of origin on their packaging to let consumers know where things are being grown, where they're coming from, and to begin to start demanding that, in our retail locations that we have access to produce that's grown in the United States to help support, farmers that are trying to be profitable, because the imports are beginning to undercut the economic stability of these commodities.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. And then the other thing I think I said yesterday was, what are you going to take on a whole semi-truckload of milk? That's, by the way, it's unpasteurized whole milk, which your government has told you that you cannot sell.
Absolutely.
It's not just as easy as dropping off a semi-truckload of 40,000 gallons at your local food bank. It's whole milk.
Yeah, there's lots of barriers. And it's about, having these conversations to try and put our heads together to figure out how we can be resilient through this time and or, look at the systems, right? Like in sustainability, a lot of, there's a lot of talk about systems. And when you look at systems, you're not looking at individual parts and trying to fix individual parts. You're actually trying to look at the entire system and look at the inputs, look at the function, look at the outputs and the externalities. And I think the more we have these conversations, the more we can understand how the system works and begin to build on, the foundation that we already have, but maybe adjust some things to perform better.
I don't
know.
I think I don't know if there is. I don't know if there is. I don't know if anybody's actually really taken the time to look at a milk facility, a processing facility. It's over a 25-acre, 50-acre campus. It's massive.
Right.
Their trucks are lined up dumping milk. It's they're unloading milk by the the semis are lined up. The milk situation is definitely not something that can be taken and just changed the way that works because it's so large. The food side,
and it has a lot of impacts.
It impacts everything. Think about that: cheese, everything that's dairy, butter. Butter. Everything. Okay, so if you go to the store and you want to buy cookies, they're not going to be there because they didn't have the butter. And I think that's the part. Maybe this is the part that people aren't understanding is that the chain is broken, and everything let's use butter as a perfect example. Think about everything that's in butter or everything that has butter in it. Mm-hmm. It's not there. They can't make it because there's no butter. They can't make your frozen quesadillas. They can't make your frozen quesadillas because there's no cheese to put in the quesadilla.
That's right.
There's no
yogurt.
pizza. There's no frozen pizza because there's no cheese.
Yep.
These are the things that I think this is why it's upsetting to me, is that people are not understanding that the chain is broken, and it's going to take, if these dairy farmers go under, there's going to be a massive domino effect. I think you and I talked a little bit. Yeah. You and I talked a little bit about potatoes up here in the Pacific Northwest. One of the big potato producers has started withdrawing contracts, meaning that now the farmer is now not planting potatoes. Now that, you can say, well, one farmer I know, he produced enough potatoes to supply McDonald's. We did the math one time. He grows enough potatoes so he could 1 week worth of French fries for McDonald's. That's how many potatoes he grows. And once again, so these guys, the producers are taking back contracts for this year, and they're not planting potatoes. Another guy that I know.
Well, I was just going to mention, since you're talking about potatoes, when I was speaking with Shay earlier this week, he mentioned that, onions is the number 2, he either said it was the most consumed or you find the most onions. It's the second most consumed vegetable, second to potatoes, and potatoes is number 1. We eat potatoes in this country. Whether it's French fries, mashed potatoes, whatever, hash browns. We eat a lot of potatoes,
yes.
And we grow a lot of potatoes.
Well, because it's a staple. It's something that you can get starch from. It's easy. It's stable. There's a lot of things you can do with it. And, so that's another chain, another part of the food chain that is collapsing. Corn, in my video that I did for LinkedIn, he's got corn. He's got 5 or 6 pivots of corn, and corn is costing him more money to plant right now than they're asking, the world is asking this farmer to grow something that it's costing him money to plant, that there's no market for at the end of the season. But he has to continue on, because if he doesn't, there's not going to be corn.
Well, most of the corn, it's my understanding anyway, most of the corn that's grown in the U.S., upwards of 70%, I think, is used for animal feed, right? So it's going to feed the cows, it's going to feed the chickens, it's going to feed the pigs, on the animal, in the animal production world. But the impact of that, if they're, like it or not, whether the animals are eating corn or not, whether you like it or not, if there's no corn to feed the animals, then the farmers who are raising the cattle and raising the hogs and raising the chickens don't have any feed for those animals. And hence, that goes back into the loop of, well, then if we can't feed our animals, then we're not going to have the end product, which is a meat source or a protein source that, Americans consume. Now they consume more chicken than they consume beef, right? Chicken has kind of taken over, and a lot of chicken outfits and farmers, they feed them corn. That's just the reality.
Yeah. It's so, we're kind of going round and round here, but I don't know if there is a solution. I wish we were talking about a solution. Right now we're just playing Chicken Little. The sky's falling. The sky's falling. The sky's falling. And I wish we had yesterday. What was that?
Sorry, you said something yesterday that I thought was interesting. You talked about the canary in the coal mine and just thinking strategically about what's happening, thinking logically about what's happening. It's easy to get emotionally riled up about what's happening and what could happen and the possibilities. But this is chess. It isn't checkers, right? We have to think about what the outcomes are. We have to think about what happens next and awareness buys you time, and time buys you options. So if we're seeing what's happening right now, and we're aware of it because we're talking about it, because we're raising questions, because we're talking to farmers, we're talking to people who are actually feeling the direct impact of what's happening right now. There's an impact that's coming. It's kind of like when you see a big wave coming to shore, like you can either stand there and look at it until it crashes on your head, and then you're scrambling to try and not drown, or you can get out of the way and figure out what you can do to protect yourself. And so I think, we may be going around and around talking about the food supply chain, but I think it's important to talk about the components of what we're dealing with, because it's not just a one, problem. It's not just a singular problem. It is a very multi-layered, multifaceted problem that involves a lot of people, a lot of money, a lot of resources, and hopefully these conversations will encourage more people to have these conversations.
I think that people, when they go to the store, we've already seen, I went to one of my favorite burger places, and my favorite burger, instead of being, it was like $7.50, was almost $10. And I'm like, okay, I can see that the food prices are going to start to skyrocket. People are going to go to the grocery store, and milk is going to be $10 a gallon, could possibly be $20 if it's bad enough. And you're not going to be able to buy certain things. They're just not going to be available. And then people will go, oh, this is what you were talking about. But it's not a switch. It's agriculture. So now you have to go through another whole season, depending on whatever it is that you're missing, has to be now grown, and it takes 90 days, 100 days, 120 days.
Yep.
So we could possibly be gone out a whole year waiting for something to come back. So, it's a possibility.
It's the water diamond paradox, right? Like, when there's limited supply, then the price of things goes up. Not to mention that the price of food in the United States has gone up percentage points every year, right? So the cost of food is going up, but wages have stayed flat.
Yep.
So there's a mismatch there. So and right now, with massive unemployment, I read something earlier this morning that just yesterday, another 5.2 million Americans applied for assistance. So, we're in a precarious economic situation.
Yes, Michele, have you I've watched movies that come from that come out of the Great Depression. You see the videos, you see the pictures, you see the stories of the Great Depression, people giving their kids up. And I read an article that they said we could possibly be going into even a deeper Great Depression than what we already that happened in the last one. That's stunning. That is, with the unemployment rate now. I'm my buddy, smart doctor guy. He goes, I don't think it's going to be that bad. And of course, I'm sitting here talking about this agricultural problem and going, I don't know, man. I don't know if this food shortage goes bananas along with this massive unemployment. How many people get to go back to work, I guess, is the bigger question that we won't know until things get turned back on. How many actually get to go back to work? That's going to be the telling. But I still see millions and millions of people unemployed, not being able to find work.
Absolutely. And that's not, the numbers haven't reduced. They've only grown in the last, say, 12 months. People talk about, up until February of this year, the economy was strong. The stock market reached its peak in February. All that's fine and good, but let us not forget that we are over $20 trillion in debt.
Yeah, that's
we
the other
can't
thing.
forget
Yeah,
that.
I don't.
Where's the money gonna come from?
I should change the name. I should change the name of this to the apocalypse. The apocalypse episode where we talk about all the.
It's I mean, we can call it whatever we want, and I'm not trying to sound like the Chicken Little, but I think it's worth thinking about things rationally and thinking about things from a multi-faceted perspective. So on my podcast, I look at the food supply chain from an ecological standpoint, from an economic standpoint, and from a health impact standpoint. Mm-hmm. And I think it's very useful to, not just have a tunnel vision about something because, you think about this one thing, but it's really important, I think, to look at the different perspectives and what those impacts will look like, or what are they currently, and can we manage what we're doing and or pivot what we're doing or adjust what we're doing to provide some resilience for us in the landscape.
It's going to go to the local farms. It's going to go. I mean, hopefully, what we learn out of this is that to buy local. And of course, that also means that works great for the southern states, where they can grow stuff all year round. But, up here it gets cold and it snows and it gets, below freezing for months at a time. You can't grow things. So now you're still relying on that food chain. So, but I do see, I do see a switch. I can see that happening where the smaller farmers who are now just screaming that big ag's killed them and they can't make any money are all of a sudden going to become in the forefront and being able to produce. But
it's already happening. It's already happening. If in my little world, I look at, or last week I was, doing some posts because the season is now for putting things in the ground and getting things going. Mm-hmm. And what's happening is there have been a lot of small family seed companies. And I'm not talking about the big ones like the Monsanto, Bayers. I'm talking about the family-owned, non-GMO, heirloom, organic seed companies that are sold out of seeds. So people are naturally, beginning to take notice of what's happening and take responsibility by purchasing seeds, albeit late in the season, right? Because seed purchasing happens in January, February. But seed companies are sold out. The home gardening industry is exploding. People they want to know how to grow their own. And I do some of that work. Some of my things that I'm going to be doing on my podcast are focused helping people understand how they can grow their own and knowing that they can grow food anywhere. You can grow food anywhere. And I think in times like these, it's a skill you can cultivate that you don't have to do it, but it's a good thing to kind of have in your back pocket.
Yeah. So pivoting real quick, you posted that. I saw you posted this on LinkedIn, and I posted it on LinkedIn that we were going to be doing an open podcast. If there's somebody out there just listening and they'd like to call in. Now's your time to call in. It's funny, Michele. I've tried this. I don't know how many times, and nobody calls in. It's so funny. And of course they always come back, go, oh, I missed it, or it's so you try to I look at it as possibly a service that giving 5 minutes to talk about whatever you want to talk about, but they just don't call in, and it's so funny. These podcasts are not easy.
Will.
Well,
I know, man. I'm in the trenches with you.
You do. You do. How many episodes do you guys under your belt now?
So on Friday it'll be episode number 7. I just started my podcast this year, and I do a weekly podcast, and I'm doing them in seasons. So I'm coming up on the end of my season 1 in a couple of weeks, and I've got some great guests coming up. This cast that we're doing right now, I'm going to release it also this week, probably over the weekend as a bonus episode, so people in my audience who may or may not know that we're doing this right now can actually listen to the both of us. So I'll be promoting that. And I'll be doing a few more.
I thought it was a cool idea to do kind of like a dual. You get to use it on your podcast, and then of course I get another one. And I'm not doing seasons. There I think. Hey, hang on just a second. We got our first caller. I think I know who this is. He said he was going to call in. Hang on a second.
Hello.
Good morning.
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 Good morning.
Who do we have on the line?
Hey, it's Justin.
Hey, how are you, bud?
Good.
So were you listening, or did you just get time to call in?
No, I was listening. It's
okay.
You guys are talking about something it's near and dear to our hearts with the food supply chain and all that kind of stuff. So I was really curious to see what you guys are thinking, and it's definitely something where, looking at what's out there, it's a weird world we're in right now. So hopefully we're planning for the worst and all that good stuff. But
so what you said, are you a farm? Yeah. What do you do, Justin?
We have a hemp tracking software. So we track supply chain from genetics through to the consumer. So we come from a background of 20 plus years in food logistics and things like that. So working in co-manufacturing facilities and all that, and looking at supply chains. So, looking at the way that it works and what's been happening, all that stuff. I mean, one of our lead data scientists was telling us that the easiest company to disrupt for a supply chain is Walmart, because they keep all their inventory in the store, not in a distribution center like a smaller retail grocery store or something like that. So, seeing where there's disruptions in the chain has been interesting from our perspective, but from a global perspective, it's different seeing people freak out and buy 3,000 rolls of toilet paper. Who would have forecast that?
Right.
So, but
hey man, people they tend to. It's funny how our society, whatever started that. I'd love to know the first spark that said we're going to run out of toilet paper, and then it just blew up. I'd love to know the catalyst to that whole phenomenon.
I think someone told me that it was that because you're homebound, you'll be using 40% more toilet paper at home, because normally your midday movements and all that are happening at an office or a restaurant or a coffee shop or somewhere else. So
that makes
when you figure most people work 8-10 hours a day, and you're doing that at home now, you're using that many more stops.
I've got a question for you, Justin. I got a question for you. Since your background is in logistics, and logistics is a huge part of the supply chain, because it's about moving product from one place to the next. And I'd love to kind of hear your perspective on the current, issues with logistics beyond, just trucks, truckers not driving the routes, and, they're being limited in that way. What can you explain kind of in a few sentences how logistics actually works in the food supply chain? And the second part of the question is there a way to kind of approach what's happening right now from a local distribution standpoint? I'm curious about that.
Yeah, the biggest challenge that will always be there is the prediction of trends and things like that. I mean, we do predictive analytics, things like that, all day long for any number of industries with our parent company. But when you talk about logistics, if I told you to stop by 10 different places, you would pretty quickly and easily route all that out in your mind, right? The human brain can handle that kind of capacity. But when you talk about hitting 40 or 50 or 60 places with 30 different variables, it takes some serious computing power to do that efficiently. And then you start layering in additional data sets like, how much fuel is in the truck, if it's a breakdown, if this store doesn't open until 9:30 and this one's open at 10. Those kind of things, that logistics and the prediction of that will always be a challenge. And it's getting better as technology advances, but it's hard to figure out, the most efficient way to do it. And some companies have gone as far, like I think it's UPS, that they only do right turns. And it's dumb little factors like that, because a right turn doesn't expose the driver and the vehicle to a cross-traffic collision. Right turns are more efficient because you can stop at a red light and go through that red light versus waiting for a left.
Sure.
And the time frame of just taking right turns, as dumb as that sounds, exponentially changes the way that they can deliver packages efficiently. So, long term, I think the solution is going to be the adoption of the data and how that data is used, because, you can't ever predict COVID. I mean, you can kind of see some writing on the wall and stuff like that, but you won't ever see, 5 million people become unemployed overnight. You just can't plan for that. But planning for how to get through it is finding the shortest supply chain as possible, which is getting back to buying local. I think you're right in that respect, because, if I go to the farm, I'm in Nebraska, so if I go out to a farmer that I know that's growing crop right now, I can buy from him and drive it to my house if I really wanted to. But to go to the grocery store, I've got to rely on 40 or 50 other people sometimes. So.
Right.
Yeah, and then so when you go to
sorry, Corey.
I was gonna say when you go to the farmer out there and your buddy, or he's that's unprocessed, whether it's corn, wheat, whatever, soybeans, whatever that is. That's just a raw product. Like you said, there's a bunch of people and a bunch of processes that when you go and grab that, use that cookie package analogy again, you go grab that cookies off the shelf, how many people and processes touch that? And I think that's the disconnect that people are having with our food chain. I think I'm kind of enjoying this education side of this, guys. I really am. I'm really, I'm not usually an educator because stupid people make me nuts. But in this case, it's not necessarily that they're stupid. It's just that they're not educated. It's just that they haven't been introduced to what we're talking about. Chocolate milk does not come from brown cows, people. It's one of my favorite. So,
well, Justin, just to kind of tag on to the second part of my question from a local logistics standpoint and from your expertise, is there a way to think about, shorter routes around communities? Because 80%, what I was going to say earlier, is 80% of American communities rely on the food supply chain, right? That it's just the fact. And so if we know that 80% of 300 million people, that's a lot of people that rely on the food supply chain. And if there's a way to make it, or a way to adapt it to a local distribution model, what would that look like? Could it even happen? Is it possible?
That, like many things in what we've done over the years, it's a yes and a no answer, right? It's it's the firm Facebook maybe. So the large stuff, the Costco's and the Walmarts of the world, they are going to have to rely on more traditional models just because their internal mechanisms, they move at a certain speed, right? The more localized franchise chains or whatever, even the more localized sourcing things, have some adaptability because they can buy independently. So it's going to come down to the chain of custody, really, because if you look at eggs, eggs might go through 6 or 7 different people's hands. So to get rid of 2 or 3 people in the middle, gets that food there that much faster. But what are you cutting out of the equation? Are you cutting out a wholesaler that's doing the just egg yolks or somebody like that? It's just a question of what kind of food Americans will tolerate. And that's the real challenge. I mean, when you go over to, like, I was in Ireland and Scotland a while back, and all the bread tasted amazing. Well, it wasn't packed full of sugar. So, and I appreciated the bread over there a heck of a lot more. And, we had red stag sausages and all this stuff. I'm like, why can't I get this in the States? And it's because it's all got to be processed or pumped up with sugar or something else. So,
and additives and preservatives and things like that, yeah.
Yeah. So it's just
fascinating.
Sometimes we get in our own way trying to protect the world and protect ourselves. And sometimes Darwin had it right, But maybe the kid who eats the most marbles should make it to have children of his own,
Maybe.
Oh. Well,
thank you for that.
You're the first one that's you actually called in for the open mic. I think you probably heard us talking about that. Nobody calls in, and so you're the very first one to call in and be on the show. I appreciate you calling in. Do you want to plug your company and get it on the air?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, we're Hemp Batch Tracker, so just hempbatchtracker.com. But we do genetics all the way through to retail for everything from COAs to logistics to shipping, all that kind of good stuff. So we do it all. We have lots of fun with it. So plenty of cool things to do there.
Right on, man. I appreciate you contributing to the show. I thoroughly enjoy that you called in, and you definitely added to the show. So,
well, and I got to do the thing. A first time listener, first time caller. So I found that out. Sorry, I missed that.
Yeah, you do the Jim Rome. I'm flaming out. I'm out. Oh, that's great. Good. That's great. Well, you're more than welcome anytime, Justin. You can definitely contribute to the show, bud.
Cool, appreciate it. Yeah, keep up the good work. Love what you guys are doing.
Right on, man.
Thanks,
Take care,
Justin.
bud. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye. Well, so you have to take off here in a couple minutes. Guess who showed up? It was my EBH, my executive better half. That's actually her true title. She actually has business cards with EBH on it. Yeah. Executive better half.
Yes.
And it was my fault. It was my fault. I forgot to tell her that you and I had talked yesterday, Michele, and set this up for today. We have another one tomorrow with a hemp decorticating guy, and so she was expecting tomorrow morning, not today. So it was my fault. I thought I told her, but
I'm glad you're taking the blame.
That's what I do. So. Yeah, when we started,
I have been listening.
Yeah, so when we started this whole thing, and she's like, "Well, what's going to be my title?" And I'm thinking, I don't know. And then I thought, how about executive better half? Because she's my better half, right? So that's how that executive better half thing came about. So,
what am I supposed to call her? What's your name?
You can call me Beth.
Hi, Beth.
Oh, you went on the call
Michele.
yesterday. Yeah, I'm sorry. My beautiful wife Beth, executive better half, executive producer of the HempLogic radio program, and sidekick.
Yes.
You got a lot of titles, honey.
Yes, I do. And they're weighing on my shoulders right now.
No. Well, I hope that, Michele, that this gives you a little bit to work with. I'm sure me doing a live show is way better than having to sit there and edit through this whole thing. But
you're taking my workload down a notch, which is great because I'm super busy, So I love it. I'm going to post it I might ping you for, a little bio or something, or maybe I'll just grab it off your website there and, connect my audience with your audience so that we can keep the conversation going. I think it's so important to keep these conversations going, and maybe we can do this again.
Absolutely. It's there's good ones, and then some of them, just like, well, I look at these, and you could probably attest to this doing podcasts, is your seventh one is way better than your first.
Yes.
And it's the same thing
no
here.
No doubt about it.
Yep. And of course, my doing it live really throws people off. It really, it takes a while to get, into a groove, and once you get into a groove, sometimes it's like, oh, I wish I'd have made this an hour and a half, just because the conversations are starting to go. So
yeah, but we had a great caller call in, man. That's a success right there. You got to celebrate the little successes, along the way.
Do you have time? We got one more. We've got someone just called in. Do you have time for one more? Just a real quick one.
Let's do it.
All right, hold on just a second. You are on the air with HempLogic Radio. Who's this?
Is that me?
Yes.
Hi, hang on. Let me mute my background because I'm watching you. Did you see where yesterday that the USDA has approved importation of Chinese citrus?
I did not see that.
Well, yeah, I did.
Yeah, here we are
and
to figure out how we're going to improve food supply here in the United States, and we're once again going to rely on China. They can't supply us everything else we've offshored to them. What are we thinking?
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
It's a scale problem, guys. That's how much produce and how much citrus we use, is that even if they were to say no more imports from anyone, we can't produce what our if you stopped exports, which I'm sure we do export, but if we stop the exports, we still are going to have a shortfall. That's the problem. Scale.
Right, but it's like a double-edged sword, right? It's like a double-edged sword. So there's demand for citrus in the United States, right? It's summer, people, about to be summer. People want to have their citrus. And if growers in the U.S. have come to have to stop production or whatever, then we need to, I think what they're thinking is they want to have the supply and meet the demand, right? There's that point of equilibrium where you have to, you want to get people what they want. On the flip side, and I talked about this in my third episode called How Food Secure Are You, and how the coronavirus is impacting, our food supply. And we import so much and a variety of foods from China. And one of those things that was really startling to me was we import almost 95% of our vitamin C from China, which, that's a staggering number, and I think, the caller, I didn't catch her name. What was your name?
Julie.
I mean, you bring up a great point, and even though it is, one of those things, like we have enough citrus produced in this country to meet the demand, I think, is the first question. The second question is, if we do have enough demand in the country, right, like why do we need to bring citrus in from China? Because once it gets here, we have the same distribution and logistics problems, is getting it from the barge that it's coming in on to communities and the retail location. And so I think that's a great question. I don't know if I have the answer to it. I don't know if, Corey, you have the answer to it, but I think it is a multifaceted kind of thing. I feel like I said that a lot in this hour that we've been talking, because we want our lemons, our limes, our oranges, our mandarins, all of those things. And if they're not being produced, how do we meet the demand in the market? And if we're going to meet the demand in the market by importing from China, then we still have a distribution problem in the food supply chain. So we're not really solving, it doesn't seem like we're solving many problems by importing. Plus, we're also driving the cost of U.S. producers and their goods down by importing? So I think it's a really great question, Julie. I'm not sure that I have the answer. What do you think about that, Corey?
There is really not a true answer to what we're circled back around when there's not an actual, if we did this, we could solve the problem. And, I understand Julie's upset, or, why are we importing food from China? And I'd really like to know, this is almost, is how much of it is actual truth? Do we have actual documentation of, cargo ships dropping off citrus from that's actual China? Did it come from China? These are things
I
that,
just read the article on the USDA website.
It was USDA?
Yesterday.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, USDA approved this yesterday. We've already demonstrated that we have become dependent on importation from a country halfway around the world that is not able to supply our needs right now. Why would we be dependent for any other products? We do not have a citrus shortage in this country.
No.
I agree 100%.
Well, and that's, I'm just throwing out there, is that a true statement? Are we, it's funny, we export stuff and then we import things. We're importing what we export. It's like, wait,
we have
has
a
to
stable
stop.
citrus. We have stable citrus supply year round in this country. We do not
from California and Florida, right?
Yeah, and Arizona.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Wow. See, this is part of what we were talking about, Michele. Is things are the industries, the agriculture industry is going to pivot and change to take care of this. Just like I see once we start back up again, the medical side of our industries, our medical supplies, our medicines are going to be brought back from wherever we ship them off to, whether it's China or another country. They're going to be brought back, and we're going to start making these things back in the United States. I think we're going to the whole thing. Everyone's going to stop and take a look at what are we exporting and why.
Well, I don't remember.
And what are we importing and why? And I think that speaks directly to Julie's question. Why, if we have a stable citrus production, system and products and farmers in the United States already, we can already meet the demand in the United States for citrus. If that's the assumption, right? If that's what we're talking about, we can already do that. Then why do we need citrus from anywhere else, whether it's from China or Argentina, Spain, whatever? I mean, Shay talked about it a little bit in my podcast where, he was like, well, the importation of certain specialty onions is in the marketplace because people want variety. People want, some unique variety of onion, and so if they're not grown in the United States, then of course we'll import them because there's competition. But if we already have, unless it's some unique citrus variety, then I think Julie's making the case that we don't need to be importing it at this time. We need to rely on the supply that's already here.
Why are we sending chickens to China to be processed only to bring the processed chicken back?
Exactly.
Nuts.
Because it's cheaper.
It's nuts.
But I do believe this is part of the solution, but it's going to take time, and hopefully the chain has not been broken so badly that we go hungry. And that's
part of it is our trade agreements, right? Like we entered into NAFTA to kind of open up, these trade agreements, and we're seeing some of the impacts of that right now. And it's not necessarily working in our favor, which I think, again, Julie, you make a great point. Why are we raising chickens here, exporting them for processing, and then bringing them back to sell in the United States? It's absurd. It's absurd from an ecological standpoint. Why would we ship, thousands of pounds of chickens halfway across the world twice? It's absurd,
and there's the
right?
Like
it doesn't make any sense.
Well, But also, guys, keep in mind, it's also they're doing it because it's cheaper. Believe that or not. So you're actually shipping chicken across the ocean back to China. Then China breaks it down, and then it comes back to us. It's actually, and it's cheaper that way. So there's the chain. There's certain parts of the chain that are broken, and I think we're gonna. Yeah. I think these changes are coming.
But that's an externality, right? Like so if it's cheaper for corporations, they're doing it to increase their bottom line and increase their profit margins. If they can pay less for their cost of goods and pay employees cheaper overseas to process our chicken and bring it back here, and it's cheaper to do that than to actually pay Americans and create jobs and maybe have a more expensive product that Americans might even be willing to pay for because they know that it's not having an environmental impact. It's creating jobs, so there's an economic impact that's a positive externality, but we're not able to do that for whatever reason. And I don't know if it's because the people who are in power in these industries and our legislators don't really care about that. They just care about, the kickbacks that they've got to give to their stakeholders at the end of the year, but it is a challenge, and it is something that we absolutely have to keep talking about. Well, so I'm really glad that you called me.
Of that.
Say that again?
I said there's also the food safety concerns of that. The level of hygiene has been demonstrated to not be the same in China as it would be in American poultry processing facility.
Absolutely.
Do we really need to endanger the health of Americans for our chicken to be a little bit less expensive?
I would say no.
Well, it's all economics, guys, and this is part of the scale that I keep bringing up scale because that's really what drives this whole thing. It's scale.
Absolutely.
So, well, guys, we're coming up. We've almost been on for an hour. This is, so Julie, thank you for calling in. It's been great. You definitely had a great question.
You're welcome. Thank you. Bye.
All right. Take care. Have a good one.
You too.
Awesome.
That was great. So look at there. You got 2 phone calls this one.
You're welcome. Thank you. Bye.
All right. Take care. Have a good one.
Farmers. Uh-oh.
Oh, that's some feedback.
Sorry about that. Yeah, sorry about that. Anyway.
Well, Michele,
I've got to bounce out of here too.
Yep. All right. Well, we'll let you go and look forward to hearing your side, your podcast, and have a little bit of edit. I'm sure you can edit. I would.
Yeah.
I would, but I appreciate your time, and I think this ended up being a good show. Ended up being a good one.
Yeah, man. I think I just missed out on the end of it. I think my recorder stopped right after Julie hung up. But, anybody who's listening in, they can find it on your website, and I'll post mine on mine, foodslane.com. You can follow me on all the socials at foodslane. And I'm really glad you invited me to join the conversation. I'm really grateful.
Right on. It's cool.
Let's do it again.
You have a great rest of your You have a great rest of your day, and we'll call it a show.
Excellent. And to your EBH, thanks for being here too.
Oh, I'm sorry it was so late in the show, but I appreciated being on here. You have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks,
you too.
Michele.
Bye, guys.
All right.
Yep.
Bye. All right, hon. Executive better half. Let's call this. Let's wrap this up. So.
Sounds good. Sounds good. I will. You guys.
The collapsing food chain and what it means to you episode of HempLogic Radio is done, and we're gonna call it a show. I will see you next time, and have a great day. Talk to you later.
Bye-bye now.